Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Friday, the 4th of February, comes to you from London. And what a day it was yesterday. Facebook shares down 26%. We had flagged these downside targets, so we were seeing downside targets some 20% lower at the start of the week, and there were three targets. And that's where we went. So not a big surprise. The extent of the fall is you don't necessarily expect it to happen in one day, but the fact is the targets were there, and you just can't ignore the targets. The weekly cloud was still above on support, but realistically, this is going to be such a shock for Facebook. We'll see a relief and then probably further lows. We've still got one low on the 60-minute chart, some 40% lower. So this is really quite catastrophic for the chart of Facebook. We'll take a look at some of the other big players, but what this means and what this means for the Nasdaq. But first of all, we'll just look at the markets overall. Mixed colours on the screen this morning. We had, the Nasdaq was down over 3% overnight, so we are seeing a bit of a relief rally this morning. Looking at the dollar index, we've given up all of last week's gains, so really quite something there. A lot of volatility in the markets, so the dollar is still bullish on the medium and long-term chart, but the reality is just short-term we're seeing a sell-off. That means the euro has looked stronger against that weaker dollar, and we see all the big weekly candle down and then the relief rally. But the trend is still bearish, medium and long term. Sterling sitting at 135.70, so it's benefited this week from a weaker dollar, and against the euro we actually are weaker. Interesting that interest rates went up in the UK yesterday, and sterling fell against the euro. So markets had already priced that in, and when it came, we saw a fall away. It's quite unusual. You wouldn't expect that. Bitcoin sitting at $38,000, so looking stronger here. And starting to look like we might get back into the 40s. We've got a target to $46,000 if we can break to new highs there. So that's going to be quite key. Here we see the S&P chart was down 2.4% overnight. And this is really interesting because we've crossed below the cloud. We've come back to test the cloud, to find resistance on the cloud on the price. And now it's all about, will we make a lower low? Make a lower low, we activate a downside target for 18, 19%, 20% downside. So new lows, 20% downside, that's the target. So not looking good at the moment. We bounced on the cloud here on the weekly, but on the daily we've now come through. So that's really significant. And of course the Nasdaq, the picture is one of below the cloud quite clearly on the daily, just struggling to get back above the cloud. We'd normally like to see a 3-bar rule here, and on the lagging line we just didn't get above there. So again, 30% downside for the Nasdaq. These are very big targets indeed. Looking at the futures, we're seeing the E-mini S&P up 0.7%, the Nasdaq up, recovering half of its lost ground yesterday. We had good news out from Amazon overnight, so that will cheer the market. The VIX volatility sitting at 24, so the fear index is in bullish territory. Don't be surprised to see this going much higher if we make new lows. The FTSE future up 0.5%. The DAX in Germany down 0.5% because a lot of the falls in the US happened once the European markets were closed. 15,000 is the key level on the DAX. Japan actually was up 0.5%, and the Hang Seng, interestingly, we've opened for the week. Because of Chinese New Year, so recovered quite a lot of the lost ground that we saw last week. So it's bucked the trend a bit there. Shanghai is not yet open. That will be next week. So Chinese New Year there. The Sensex was actually lower yesterday, of course, and again has come below the cloud. So this is a feature that we are seeing throughout. The Aussie market was actually up 0.6%. So we're seeing here that short-term recovery. But of course, it will be interesting to see if Oz can buck the markets. We'll look at the energy mix in a minute. Soft commodities, sugar is up, wheat is up 0.4%. still looking very strong there, and corn also looking stronger there as well. So that's quite key. Gold above the $1,800 level, so that's really what we want to see there with gold. And looking at US 10-year yields, down slightly at 1.81%. Really big thing that happened yesterday, not many people look at this, is that the German Bund future fell below that 16750 level. That's the critical level that we've been giving. And if we look at the monthly chart, not many people look at monthly charts. Here's the monthly chart, and this just highlights, there's the trend to 2008, nice steady trend in the 90s and the noughties. Quantitative easing comes along with a financial crisis, and a massive bond buying program fuels this rise in bonds. But interestingly, we're now seeing that breaking down. So bond markets, after 30 years, looking set to go into a bear trend, and that will, of course, and we're seeing that with the lower highs, that will be very bad for bond prices. So and of course that means yields going much higher. So bond markets in a new downtrend, that's just really just starting, and so markets will have a difficult few years with that backdrop. Looking at Apple, we didn't fall that much yesterday, holding bullish above the cloud. Of course, we had spectacular results out from Apple last week. Amazon actually was already on its targets and had already been bearish below the cloud. We will see a relief rally today because the results were good, but the interesting thing is no real signs of making new highs there, so not good news there. Google didn't fall as heavily yesterday and again had good results, but is below the cloud. A lot of these charts were already below the cloud, so we're not surprised to hear this bad news happening with the cloud results. The same with Microsoft, below the cloud, hitting the cloud from below, so really quite significant. And Tesla, we were bearish on at the start of the week. Again, we've wandered below the cloud here. Downside targets of 14% for Tesla, so just keep an eye on these price targets. Looking at the energy mix, Brent crude up 1.6%, making new highs this morning. We went out with clients was bullish. US nat gas is actually recovering. We were a bit bearish this morning because we were below the cloud, but that's looking a little bit better. Emissions at 95 euros. That keeps powering ahead. Upside target here to 98. And if we look at gas, we went out as bullish again this morning. TTF up. The recovery underway here with gas, looking like a higher low, so looking pretty good there. MBP also up, and if we look at German power, up 1.5%, a fairly strong end to the week there as well, having broken back through the 140 level. That's it for today. Until Monday, have a great weekend. Happy charting. See you then.